Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Welcome everyone to Satsang. Happy as always to see you all. So if you'd like to comment or you'd like to speak with me, you'll need to turn on your microphone. I have everyone muted right now. Something that's come up a couple of times in the last week or so that maybe some others of you will find useful if I speak about it for a moment is that even though many of us are still mm, locked down in some way, maybe not completely, but our activities are mm, limited from what they normally would be if we weren't in this coronavirus situation. Um, some people are still experiencing a kind of dullness or, mm, yeah, maybe we can say dullness or torpor in their minds. So this has been reported to me a couple of times that people are, even though their activities are much more limited and so on, they still aren't remembering in some way that the purpose of their existence in this moment is the same as it has always been, that their purpose, if you will, is to realize the self. And the positive thing that's come out of this insight is that people are noticing that even though they have time, they are not quite as distracted as they used to be with things outside the home, with friends, families, festivals, parties. They still are not, they have become aware, you can say, that they still are not devoting time and energy and attention to what they know is their true purpose in being here, which is to awaken in this moment. And so for some of us, what's happening is there's this recognition that mind is still very active, there's an opportunity to come to a stop, or at least to slow down. But that doesn't seem to be happening. And some people are even noticing that there's been an increase in screen time, in watching videos, watching movies, watching television, speaking with friends, speaking with family. All of this is fine, but still it leads to this sense that one's purpose, which is to awaken, is not being fully embraced or attended to. So I just want you to be encouraged that even if you're experiencing this, finding yourself unable in some way to spend the amount of time which you thought or you think you should be able to spend at this moment with your practice, that this is a common experience. You aren't alone in this. The mind is slippery, you may have noticed. And even though we have this opportunity to come to a stop and to ask this question, who am I? Or what is aware here? The mind finds a number of ways, even when we're physically asked to stop, to stay busy, to stay engaged outside, to keep pursuing its interests. And this can occasionally make us lead to the idea that somehow I'm failing in my practice, or I'm not doing enough, maybe. Maybe it's not an actual failure. Maybe it's just this underlying feeling that I'm not doing enough. I could be doing more. In scripture, there's a pointer. It's called earnestness of purpose. Earnestness meaning that we have to remind ourselves and keep coming back persistently, consistently, to ask ourselves, who is doing this? Who is thinking this? To whom is this thought coming? Who is aware here? If we don't do this, we don't bring this outward movement onto our screen, onto videos, into music, into friends, into family, into conversations continuously, which are not related to our purpose. Each of you knows the reason you're here. There's no doubt about this. The reason you are here is that your purpose is to awaken, to know who you are, to remain in this space of supreme consciousness. This has been your goal from the beginning. This doesn't disappear just because the mind becomes distracted. But what earnestness of purpose refers to is this need, if you will, when we are practicing before realization, before the self is recognized to be the foundation and the reality of all. We have to remind ourselves, don't we? This is the nature of practice, over and over, to come back into this here now presence through the question, who am I, or what is aware? So I just wanted to remind you that you have to, in some way, keep a tab on how you're spending your time. Because even though you may be alone, you may still be permitting this tendency in the mind to move outward, watching many, many videos, many, many teachers, many, many teachings, and so on. But the sages have been very clear for a long period of time that filling the mind with more information, even quote unquote spiritual information, concepts, and so on, will not bring us into the recognition of the purpose of our being, which is to awaken to the truth of our own nature. So do notice when your mind, through habit, not because you are faulty in some way or not strong enough, but just through habit, through conditioning, is still driving you into activity, even while you have the opportunity to stop. So just become aware of this tendency if it rises for you in the mind. And come back and ask yourself, who am I referring to when I say I? Who is thinking this thought? Who is engaged in this activity? What is aware here? Keep coming back and engage this aspect of practice, which is called earnestness of purpose. Remind yourself that regardless of your circumstance, regardless of what is happening in your life, your goal is to awaken, to realize your already awake nature by letting go, not by adding on. Everything that you need to know is inside you. When you transcend who you think you are and come to understand fully and completely who you really are.
Hello.
Yes.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. Can you hear me? And see me?
Yes, indeed. Mm-hmm.
Um, this self-inquiry you spoke about.
Yes.
Mm, this who is thinking, who is aware. Um, it's easier during Satsang to go deeper in this, but when I am on my own, then it's more likely to uh, see world and not, not going further than
Say
the
this
world.
again. Come a little closer to your microphone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This self-inquiry during satsang, it's easier to go deeper.
Yes.
But during the day. Sometimes there are glimpses where it goes deeper and it seems like the world is not as real, but mostly it's yeah, it seems very real.
Yes.
So this self-inquiry on my own, uh, I don't know if difficult is the right word, but
No,
it's
this is right. Yeah, no, this is right. You're absolutely right. And this is the reason why we come together in satsang is because the momentum of our own conditioning is somehow stopped because we've made the commitment. Yes, we're all coming together. We're all here at this moment. But behind this actually being here is a commitment that has arisen in yourself that says, on this day, at this time, I will sit with this group of friends and I will stop for a moment. And so, of course, this makes the absolute experience of presence of the self somehow more attainable for us at that moment. And of course, these are the conditions for practice, aren't they? This is why we set aside a space in our home. This is why we, excuse me, I'm searching for someone. Someone has their microphone on. Check your mic and make sure your mic is off. There is noise coming, there is some disturbance coming into the room. Thank you. And then, of course, when we go out into the world, there's all this outward movement. You see, the world is only an indicator that what's happened is the movement which we are directing inward during satsang has now moved out and moves toward the objects quite naturally. But what you're describing is that balance point, that point between recognizing that I have moved in and recognizing that attention has moved out. One on one side is satsang or practice, if you will. If you're home alone, you're able to put on some soft music, or you're able to sit in the silence and you move more deeply into the self. You're able to remember that your reason for sitting at home, for keeping quiet at home, is to ask this question: who am I, or what is aware? And when we go into the um, world, we have moved into a freeing of attention, if you will, into the objects which we call world. So it's only natural that we're not able to feel this deep essence at that moment. But it's also important for us at moments like this to remember that not being able to feel the self or be the self or remain as the self when we are in the world is just a consequence of the momentum of conditioning. So it's taken us many, many years to get to this point where the sense of purpose we have, that my purpose in this life is to awaken, um, can begin to show itself. But when it begins to show itself, it is relatively weak compared to the momentum of 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years of conditioning, during which time we were not engaged in the inquiry, where our habit is to allow attention to go out into the objects of the world and attempt to find some purpose or pleasure or whatever in those objects. So that's the momentum of conditioning, the habit of that. So when we begin to sit, when we begin to engage in practice, when the inquiry begins to take hold in us, it can take some time for the momentum of inquiry to become strong enough so that when attention naturally needs to go into doing some work or doing something outside ourselves, outside of the inquiry, it will take some time for the momentum of the inquiry to be strong enough for that momentum to be felt, even when the attention goes out into the various objects that we call the world. So don't despair. During the time that you're in the world, however, do find a way. This is why I talked about earnestness. Find a way to consistently remind yourself, very simply, not to go into deep practice like you're able to do in satsang when we all sit in silence together and the silence is very direct. Not that kind of silence, but just the momentary recognition using the mind. What is aware here? If you can remember this, even just a few times throughout the day, no matter what you're doing, you're sitting at your desk, you're talking to others, you're engaged in work, no matter what you're doing, if you can remind yourself just a few times during the day to simply ask this question: what is aware of this activity, and so on? What is aware here? Or if I say if I'm in a conversation and I say, well, I think this, or my opinion is that, what am I referring to when I say I? What is this sense of me? And this can just be a momentary thought, does not need to be a deep plunge into one's self-knowledge. It's just a quick reminder. The reason I suggest you do that and you make this a persistent and consistent practice is because over time, that simple remembrance brings you back over and over and over and begins to pull the attention, which becomes lost through conditioning or habit in the phenomenon of experience, pulls you back into here now. And it is here now that the self will eventually reveal itself. So the difference between being in satsang and being in the world is really, in a way, especially in the beginning of the inquiry, a matter of degree. When you have the opportunity to be in satsang, to be asking the question, who am I? What is aware here? Either alone or in the satsang group. This is a high degree of attending with earnestness to purpose, of saying, I recognize through this activity, through this looking, through this inquiry, that my intention for this lifetime is to awaken to the truth, to the nature of being, consciousness, and bliss. When I'm in the world, this is a lesser degree of attention, perhaps, on this purpose or earnestness, but nonetheless, to remind yourself throughout the day, whether it's twice in the beginning or 6 times in the beginning, eventually it will become 100 times. Just because that is the way that mind works. It builds momentum through practice. So this simple remembrance when you're in the world, when you're engaged in daily activity, just within your own self, to ask yourself, what is aware here? Just to notice this. I am aware. Not I am aware of this activity or that activity, of success or failure. Just to notice I am aware in this moment and continue your activity. This is enough.
Rishi, could I ask you something?
1 second, I think Jacob was about to say something. We were trying to
Uh,
get our mics connected. I'll come back to you, Atmavidya.
yeah, thank you. I wanted to say thank you.
Oh, okay. Good, good. Atma.
Thank you. It's just
Hello, my dear.
hello. Thank you so much for your words, and I can just see as you speak about this commitment, I can see that the longer we stay in this usual environment with people where we are supposed to work or with our families, friends, then I see that I doubt my own commitment at times, that I don't do enough, that I'm not dedicated enough, that my attention is shifting more.
So this is the time to ask yourself, who are you referring to when you say I?
Like this attention, my attention is just shifting,
Yes, yes,
and I just identify.
yes, yes,
But
yes,
there's
yes,
just this consistent feeling that something is falling asleep more and more. So then there's a feeling
yes,
of guilt.
yeah, yeah. So this is a time for real gentleness and compassion, though, toward the one who has this sense that I'm becoming distracted more and more. You know, without compassion for oneself, for this, um, and without recognition that uh, I am not the one who's becoming distracted more and more. I am the one who is noticing she is becoming distracted more and more. You see, begin to this is also an aspect of this earnestness of purpose, is to begin every time there is a self-criticism or there is a reckoning of some sort with what is being distracting, uh, to come back and to notice that you're developing this capacity to come back, more often to this question of who is aware here or what is aware here, and to be compassionate and self-supporting, so that you don't fall into that habit pattern of self-criticism. Um, because the reality is that once you notice, oh, I am falling more and more into this distractive way of being, or into this kind of mental torpor, that's the lack of clarity, because of my associations in the work I'm doing and the people that I'm spending time with. You must notice that as soon as you notice that, it's not you don't notice it in order to become self-critical. You notice it to become self-affirming. Ah, I have just awakened again. I have been asleep for the last 2 hours, or I've been asleep for the whole morning or the whole afternoon, caught in all of this. But now I am clear that before I was caught, but in the remembrance that I am here, that I am that which is aware that I was caught. Now I am back. So then this becomes self-affirming. Do you understand?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
I'm afraid of not using this time properly, because you also said that we can use this time of lockdown in a way to slow down or just to be more introspective. And I can see that sometimes as life is bringing more activities,
Yes.
there is a tendency to go with it instead of maybe just go back first and really use it wisely to deepen more and to let go.
Yes. Yes. Thank you for putting it that way, though, because that shows me that I need to clarify something. When I'm talking in this way, I was really referring to those people who have the opportunity to be mostly at home and don't have work responsibilities outside of home, and still find themselves just going onto the internet and moving from this subject to that subject and searching all day long and spending time even watching spiritual videos and spiritual teachers and stuff, but just unable to stop in that way. This is different. I wasn't referring necessarily to the person who is in a work from home situation and is spending 8 hours a day on a computer or 6 hours a day on their laptop because they're engaged with their work environment. That's very different. So yes, thank you for reminding me that I needed to clarify that. If you're at home and you are still having to be engaged in the world because this is, the way that you feed yourself and keep your rent paid and so on, you just have to be in that moment, here now, doing what needs to be done, you know, But even in that environment where you're spending a long time on the computer or you're spending a long time engaged with your coworkers, it only takes a moment to ask this question, who, or to notice in that moment, I am aware, and then go back to your activity. Yes?
Yes, yes. I just pray that this vigilance, that it becomes stronger, that this introspection,
Yes, yes, yes. But understand also that the way that this happens is not through and I understand what you're saying about vigilance. It's very important to be persistent and to be consistent, right? This is the whole meaning of earnestness of purpose, is to keep reminding yourself and staying in touch with this recognition that your true purpose in life is to awaken. But that does not mean that you need to mm, always be noticing the ways in which you fail to do that. This is not particularly helpful because this reinforces a sense of I, even though it is kind of a negative sense of I. It reinforces this sense of I. So what I'm really referring to is compassionately reminding ourselves to ask this question. Um, and, and in some ways, I'm saying to you, not to judge or have an opinion about how good or how bad you think you are doing in that pursuit. That this kind of self-judgment is not particularly helpful. Instead, replace those moments, those mind moments of self-judgment, with the recognition that you are aware in this moment, because this becomes a positive reinforcement of your practice. And it is true for many of us. I can remember for many, many years that it seemed like the only way that I could find motivation for practice was to say in some way to myself that I wasn't doing enough or I should be doing more. I mean, I know what this state of mind feels like. But now I also see that this has only very limited usefulness. It's only when we come to understand that we have the willingness within us and the capability to engage with everything for the purpose of awakening. Then everything that we do, every thought that comes to mind, every insight that we have becomes the path to awakening for us. And so we have to get over this habit in some way of saying, this is on my path to awakening and this is not. So I have to do this and not do that, and constantly be making that distinction. The truth of the matter is that everything that goes on in mind, body, and world needs to be treated with the recognition, I am not that. I am not that. I am not that. Saying I am not that does not mean I don't have to do my job. It just means I realize that I am not my job.
thank you.
So we keep coming back over and over, even when we feel very deeply involved in something, a person, a situation, our work, our family. Even when we feel very deeply involved, there is this deep recognition. I am that which is aware. I am not this activity. I'm not this thought, right? And this is what the inquiry is for. We ask ourselves, where does this thought come from? Who does it come to? And in this way, we're able to, in some way, step back from our engagement. But we don't necessarily step back from engagement with the person. We don't necessarily step back from our relationship. We don't necessarily step back from the activity. We step back from the identification that I somehow am in this relationship, that this relationship is somehow me. I remind you over and over, There is no you. Do you understand what I'm saying? There is no you. This you that you think exists is a figment of your imagination. As soon as you begin to relate to this experience which you have as the supreme, this you that you use as a way of monitoring, gauging, uh, opinionating about everything begins to diminish. As soon as you begin to realize that you no longer are willing to make an investment in this, in that which you call me. Do you understand? It's not about the nature of your activity, really. It's really about the quality of identification. Do you identify with the activity, with the relationship, with the circumstances? Or do you know yourself to be the supreme? Even if you don't believe it at this moment. Do you remember the story? Some of you I know will. The story in the book, I Am That, where the sage was asked, what is it that led to your awakening? And he said, my guru told me, you're that. And I believed him. My guru said, you are that being, consciousness, and bliss. And I believed him. And Naisakhitartha, at that moment, that his guru said to him, you are that, meaning you are that which is here now, you are that which is aware, you are that supreme consciousness. As that he still, at that moment, did not fully embrace or understand what was being said to him. And so he went home, grabbed a few things, said to his wife, I am going to the Himal. I will go to the Himalayas and sit in meditation until I understand what the truth is. And so he started to leave home, and he was walking through the city, determined that he was going to the Himalayas, find a cave, and spend years in solitude looking for himself. And then the truth of what his guru had said to him in that moment struck him. I am that. This me, which I have believed to be true, I now see is an illusion. I am no longer engaged in that. I am that which is aware. I am being, consciousness, and bliss. And at that moment, he turned around, went home, and opened up he was what's called a bidi wala. Those of you who have been in India know that on the streets of India, there are sellers who spend their days rolling herb cigarettes and tobacco cigarettes and so on, and they sell them one at a time on the street. This is a bidi wala. This is called a bidi. So this was his job. He had a little stall in front of his house. He returned home that very moment, having realized in that moment the truth of his guru's words when he said, you are that. Now he knew for sure, I am that. Had no longer a need to go to the Himalayas, to live in a cave, to abandon his wife, to abandon his business. He just went back and sat back down and started rolling cigarettes again. So understand that what's always being pointed to here is this recognition that it is not the circumstances of your life, where you live, what you do, that is the determinator of the recognition of self. It is only what you identify with. The true sadhu, the true renunciate, is not one who abandons everything and everyone. That is not your choice. That is the choice of the Supreme. What is being put in front of you is put in front of you in order for you to learn and grow and transcend the conditions of your own existence as a human, and to step into the recognition that you are that which is aware, being, consciousness, and bliss under all conditions and all circumstances. The degree to which you identify with yourself as the self, as supreme being, consciousness, and bliss will determine everything that occurs in your experience. And I know, for those of us who come from the West, this can be a very challenging cultural shift that happens when we come, because our cultures have a way of reinforcing the belief that we are not enough, that you don't know enough, that you need more. We are the cultures in the West, we are the cultures of desire. And to obtain more education, money, status, and so on, these are the driving forces of our cultures. So if I say to you, you are that, or I say to you even more directly, you are the supreme, there is nothing but God, you will flinch, because this is a cultural blasphemy. Our cultures are based on this striving to achieve something in the mind, to achieve something as a person. And I am saying to you, you need none of that. You are already here, now, being, consciousness, and bliss. Do you believe it? Remember, Nisargadatta Maharaj, one of the great teachers of the last century, said the only thing he did was believe what his guru told him, and this was enough. Very good. And don't be dismayed, knowing accepting that you are that being, consciousness, and bliss are your nature, does not mean, unless you're very, very fortunate, that you will instantly, completely cut the momentum of your conditioning. So for some period of time, maybe a short period, for many people a longer period, where there is this moving feeling of moving back and forth between the recognition, I am that, and these cultural conditionings which say, no, that can't be true. You have to struggle, you have to learn more, you have to become this, you have to become that, you have to be more successful, you have to, this sense of waving or moving back and forth between those two understandings. This may take some time unless the force of your realization is very strong and it can chop completely your cultural conditioning in this moment, which is entirely possible. But don't be dismayed if you feel this sense of waving back and forth between the realization that you are that which is aware, you are being, consciousness, and bliss, and whatever is presenting itself in your daily life. It takes some time to realize that anything can rise in my presence and all is well. Whatever it is, all is well. I am not that, so all is well. This can take some time. In the end, you will come to realize I have always been that. Before, I thought I was not aware, I was not awake. This is what I believed about myself. But now, from this place in which I know that I am that, I see that that time had no meaning. I have always been aware. This is your birthright. Claim it. I'm so grateful for those of you that are willing to speak, to share in the satsang. I know from my own experience that it's not easy when we're in a group of people to sometimes speak about the things that are very dear to us and those things which we might be experiencing or going through at a given moment, and to put ourselves out there. But without that, it's very difficult for the conversations that need to be heard by many to come forward. So for those of you who are willing time and again to step forward and to share what you're experiencing, whether that be your insight, your deep and profound insight, or that be some difficulty that you're facing at this moment. This is such a gift to the satsang. I'm very grateful, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart for your willingness to come forward and to speak for those who find it hard, harder than you do maybe, to speak in the group setting. So I'm very grateful for those of you, for all of you, of course, but for especially for those who are willing to share your experience with the group. This next week, toward the end of the week, there'll be another darshan opportunity, a silent meditation. So if you watch your notifications over the next few days, um, Anandi will put up a message about the times and days of the next darshan opportunity or meditation opportunity in silence. What we are attempting to do, and some of you already know this, but what we are attempting to do is these particular satsangs are our traditional way of spending time together. And of course, because I do them in the mornings here, that means that in India, um, they are 12 hours later, so they are at night. And then, of course, as we go around the globe, around the planet, the time shifts. And for some people, it's very challenging. And for some people, it's not really not doable because it's the satsangs are at 2 in the morning or 3 in the morning or 4 in the morning for them. So what we are doing is doing the darshans in between on the opposite schedule so that the darshan is offered in the evening, my time, which makes it morning in India, and then of course adjusts around the planet as well. So if you watch for those notifications, then you may have an opportunity to be able to drop into the silence, to share the support of all the other people that are awakening to their true nature just as you are, and to feel the support of the community of devotees around the world. So we will post something in the next day or two about the time in the day for the next darshan when you can just drop in and be in silence, when it isn't 10:30 at night wherever you are, or 2 in the morning wherever you are, when it might be in the afternoon or it might be in the morning for you. So we try to spread around a little bit the opportunities for people. So look for that in your notifications this next week.
Thank you so much for this chance. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Om Vyambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Urdvarukamiva Vandinam Mrityor Mukshiyamamritava Swaha Bhuva Bhu Om Sat Jung Hum Om. Namaste. Be well. Be happy.
Thank you, Rishi.
May your love heal the world.